Here's something that may genuinely catch you off guard. The vast majority of men have been approaching intimacy the wrong way for most of their lives, and not a single person has ever corrected them. Most guys operate under the assumption that passion between the sheets is entirely about raw power and speed. Going harder, going faster. Because that's the image reinforced by films, media, and everything they've consumed online. But here's the reality that changes everything. The way you physically connect with your partner is the single most important factor in determining whether she's truly savoring the moment or simply enduring it until it's over. Mishandle this, and you risk building walls between you. Walls made of discomfort and emotional distance. Nail it, and you create the kind of magnetic connection that leaves her wanting more of your time, feeling closer to you on every level, emotionally, physically, and everything in between. And that is precisely what we're going to unpack together today. I'm Dr. Nerita, and over the past 12 years, I've dedicated my career to men's health, working alongside thousands of men who wanted to rebuild their self-assurance, restore the spark in their relationships, and cultivate deeper, more meaningful connections with their partners. Today, I'm going to walk you through the most widely misunderstood aspects of physical intimacy, the things no one ever sits you down and explains, but that genuinely transform everything. Here's exactly what we're going to cover. First, we'll explore why beginning slowly isn't simply a matter of courtesy. It's actually a biological requirement for her body to respond and open up to the experience fully. Then, we'll get into the precise approach that elevates pleasure for both partners, including one specific element that a staggering 99% of men never even consider. And finally, we'll talk about how showing up with genuine presence and attentiveness transforms you from just another guy in her life into someone she genuinely, deeply looks forward to being intimate with. The hard truth is that most men spend decade after decade repeating the same ineffective patterns, not because they don't care, but because nobody ever explained to them how the female body actually functions during physical intimacy. So let's fix that right now, starting from the ground up. Before we dive deeper, if you're getting value out of what I'm sharing, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, leave a comment below letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from, and subscribe so you stay connected to everything else coming in this series. What I'm covering in upcoming videos might genuinely shift the way you think about intimacy at its core. Mistake number 1, launching into intensity too soon. Let's start with the single most damaging mistake men make in physical intimacy, beginning with too much force and too much depth right from the very first moment. If you're honest with yourself, you've probably absorbed most of what you know about intimate encounters from movies or content online, where things tend to escalate almost immediately. Penetration happens, and within seconds, everything is aggressive, fast, and intense. And because that's the dominant image we see portrayed, it becomes easy to assume that's the standard, that it must be what women want. But here's what's actually happening inside her body during those moments, and why that approach doesn't just fail. It actively causes harm. A woman's body requires significantly more time to become fully prepared for intimacy than a man's body does. This isn't a matter of opinion or perspective. It's pure, documented biology. During arousal, the vaginal canal physically expands to comfortably accommodate deeper connection, but that expansion doesn't happen in an instant. It's a gradual process. Blood flow increases steadily. The internal canal lengthens. Natural lubrication begins to develop. The surrounding muscles progressively soften and release tension. This is a sequence of physiological events, not a light switch that flips the second things get started. So when you jump straight into hard, deep intensity before her body has had adequate time to go through that full process, you're almost certainly guaranteeing discomfort, and in many cases, genuine pain. She may never say a word about it. She might stay quiet to protect your feelings. She might feel too uncertain to speak up. Or she may have experienced this so consistently with previous partners that she's come to believe this is simply how intimacy is supposed to feel. But regardless of whether she voices it or not, her biology doesn't lie, and her body simply isn't ready for that level of intensity yet. Starting slowly gives her the time and space her body genuinely needs to relax, expand, and fully prepare. And when you do eventually escalate, when you build toward deeper, more intense connection, it doesn't just feel okay for her. It feels extraordinary. It feels like exactly what she's been craving. This isn't about being passive or holding back out of timidity. It's about truly understanding how arousal functions in the female body and responding intelligently to that understanding. Slow doesn't mean dull. Slow means strategic. Think of it this way. You wouldn't attempt to sprint an entire marathon from the very first step. You find your pace, you build your momentum gradually, and you let the race unfold. Physical intimacy operates on exactly the same principle. Technique number 2, harnessing the power of teasing and anticipation. The second technique that can genuinely revolutionize your intimate experiences is teasing. And I want to be clear that I'm speaking specifically about the rhythm and pacing of physical connection, not only what happens beforehand. Teasing, in this context, means deliberately and strategically varying the intensity of what you're doing in order to amplify her pleasure through the psychological force of anticipation and craving. Here's the science behind why this is so effective. When she is in the middle of experiencing intense physical pleasure, her body naturally adapts to that level of stimulation. Those sensations build and deepen as she moves further into the experience. But the moment you temporarily withdraw that intensity, when you consciously dial things back, even for just a brief window of time, you create a contrast, a void. And that void ignites her desire in a way that consistent stimulation simply cannot. You're activating the part of her brain that craves what it no longer has. And when you finally return to giving her what she wants, the intensity hits entirely differently. The pleasure can feel doubled, even tripled, purely because of the contrast you created. Here's what this looks like in real application. You settle into a harder, faster rhythm that she's visibly loving. You can see it in her body, hear it in her breathing. Let her stay in that space for a while, and then pull back. Deliberately slow everything down. Move slowly and shallowly instead of deep and hard, and pay close attention to how she responds. Watch what happens to her body. She may begin pulling you closer, trying to draw you deeper, or she may start verbally communicating that she wants more. That reaction tells you everything. It tells you that you've created exactly the dynamic that makes the return to intensity feel electric. There is one important warning attached to this technique, however. Do not attempt to pull back intensity at the precise moment she's approaching orgasm. If she's right on the edge and you withdraw that stimulation, the result is going to be genuine frustration, not the good kind. This technique belongs in the earlier and middle stages of the experience, when arousal is building, not at the critical peak. Timing is everything. Technique number 3, mastering tempo variation throughout the experience. The third skill to develop is intentional tempo variation, changing your pace and rhythm throughout the full arc of the experience. If you maintain a single consistent rhythm for an extended period, something important happens neurologically. Her nerve endings adapt to that pattern and become progressively less sensitive to it. Repetitive, unchanged stimulation loses its power over time. That's not speculation. That's established neuroscience. This is why constantly mixing up your tempo is not optional if you want to keep the experience genuinely pleasurable and engaging. Your pacing should respond dynamically to multiple factors: the position you're in, how close either of you is to climax, and how far along you are in the overall experience. Early in the encounter, particularly when you're facing each other, making eye contact, kissing, and establishing a physical and emotional connection, slower and more intentional movement lets you savor the depth of that closeness. Later in the experience, when the energy has built and she may be in a different position, you have the freedom to increase speed and intensity. The point is never to follow some rigid, pre-scripted formula. The point is to create authentic, organic variation so that her body, and yours, remains engaged and responsive rather than numbing out to a monotonous pattern. Trust your instincts. Let the moment guide the movement. Variation is the key to keeping everything fresh, alive, and deeply pleasurable for both of you. Before we move on to the fourth technique, I want to quickly mention something that could genuinely save you from making embarrassing and avoidable mistakes when it comes to oral intimacy. I've put together a completely free resource that breaks down the most common errors men make during oral sex. Things that appear minor on the surface, but that completely undermine her experience in ways she probably won't mention. A lot of men genuinely believe they have this area handled, when in reality they're doing things that create discomfort or quietly shut down her enjoyment. You'll find the link waiting for you in the description below. It costs you nothing, and it has the potential to make a significant difference. Technique number 4, the grinding technique. What 99% of men miss entirely. Now we arrive at the technique that the overwhelming majority of men never think to use, and it may be the single most impactful tool available to you. I'm talking about grinding. The typical approach for most men centers almost exclusively on the in and out motion. And while that movement does provide stimulation, it almost entirely bypasses the most pleasure-sensitive structure in the female body, the clitoris. When you grind instead, when you hold her body firmly against yours, pressing your lower body into hers and maintaining deep, sustained closeness. You create direct pressure on her outer anatomy and clitoris. And this is where a genuine understanding of female biology pays enormous dividends. The clitoris is not simply that small external point that's visible on the surface. It's actually a much more complex structure with internal extensions that reach beneath the tissue. And the entire surrounding area is profoundly responsive to pressure applied near the vaginal opening. In practical terms, grinding stimulates the clitoris. And the clitoris is, for most women, the primary source of sexual pleasure and the key pathway to orgasm. By weaving grinding into your intimate encounters, you dramatically improve the likelihood that she will actually reach climax through penetration alone. So how exactly do you execute this? You remain deep inside her and move your body firmly against hers in a rocking, pressing motion, making deliberate contact with her outer anatomy. This isn't rough or aggressive. It's controlled, intentional pressure. Positions like missionary naturally lend themselves to grinding more easily than others, so position choice matters. Experiment and pay attention to what gives you the best access and angle. The results are worth the exploration. There's also a strategic bonus built into this technique. Grinding is intensely stimulating for her, but significantly less activating for you. Which means if you sense you're approaching climax sooner than you'd like, switching to grinding gives you the opportunity to regulate your own arousal and slow things down while simultaneously keeping her pleasure level high. It's one of the rare techniques that genuinely serves both partners at the same time. Technique number 5, staying present and paying attention. The fifth and final principle is the one that ties everything else together: presence and genuine attentiveness. No matter which techniques you're employing, varying rhythm, incorporating, grinding, teasing with intensity, none of it reaches its full potential if you're not fully present in the moment and acutely aware of how she's responding. Watch her body. Listen to the shifts in her breathing. Notice when she moves toward you versus when she subtly pulls back. Tune into her vocalizations, the tension in her muscles, the way her reactions change as the experience evolves. This quality of awareness is what enables you to consistently deliver the best possible experience, not just once, but every single time. It's what separates someone who's technically going through the motions from someone who is genuinely attuned to his partner. The trap that so many men fall into is getting entirely stuck in their own heads during intimacy. They're consumed with performance anxiety, second-guessing every movement, wondering whether they're doing it right or wrong. And because their attention is directed inward rather than outward, toward her rather than toward their own internal noise, they miss all of the signals she's sending. They miss the feedback that would actually make them exceptional. Presence isn't a soft or secondary skill. It is the skill that multiplies the effectiveness of every single technique I've shared today.